Welcome to CED Mosebach's online video series. This session is Studio 5000 project setup. Hey, this is Bill with CED Mosebach. I'm here for another video tutorial. Today we're going to go ahead and create a new Studio 5000 project and do some manipulating of the controller settings. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our Studio 5000. And then we could open up one of these existing projects. You can see I have some Architect and some Panel View 5000 files down here, but we're going to go to create a new project. And you can see on the side here, we could create a View Studio project using our Panel View 5000s. We could start on a View ME or SE project. But we're going to go ahead and just stick with the Logix Designer. We'll give it a name, video, and we'll go ahead and we'll select our controller. We'll stick with the control Logix, but you can see you have all the compact Logix, soft Logix, and guard Logix in here as well. So we're going to select our L81E and hit next. We're going to leave it at version, we're going to change this to version 29, which is the oldest you can go back to with this particular controller. We don't want any security on here. We are going to stay in slot 0, and so from here we just click finish. So Studio 5000 is going to go ahead and start creating our file for us, and this will just take just a second. And when it opens, anybody that hasn't used Studio 5000 yet, but was used to Logix 5000, you'll see it's exactly the same, at least up to a version 30. The look and feel is exactly the same as it was in Logix 5000. So it is the same software. So the transition is real easy. Let's give this a few more minutes to create this file. So here we are. Again, everything looks exactly the same as it would have in Logix 5000, so like it is the same software. Let's say that now you have your controller created, your project started, and your customer comes back and says, no, we would like you to create this in version 31 of Studio instead. So it's a real easy change. Some of you already know how to do this. You would just come up here to the controller properties, this little button here, and this is where all of the settings for just the controller are. What we would do is click over here on Change Controller, and you can either change the controller to a whole different model, or in this case, we're just going to keep the same controller and we're going to change it to version 31 of the software and hit OK. It will take a second to go ahead and update the firmware on the back side. So if you just give it some time and be a little patient with it, it will start converting the project over. And you see that the look of Studio has started to change. That's because in version 31 they did go with a slightly different layout. Some of the colors and layout of the software are a little different, but everything's where it was essentially before. So here we are. If we go into our controller properties again, we can see we are in L81 still with version 31. So we're good to go. The next thing that everybody has to do at some point when they're making a program is they have to add some I/O to their processor. So we do that over here. So if we're adding local I/O, so we're staying in the same chassis as our processor, we're just going to click on the right click on the back plane and do New Module. Click on New Module. There's two ways to do this. If you're if you're online with your controller, you can do a module discovery, which is going to just go out and the software will just detect what hardware is already there. So if you have the physical hardware there, when you're starting your project, you can do it that way and it's a little quicker. If you don't, you just have to come over here and type in whatever modules you're going to use. So let's go ahead and and add a simple 120 digital input card. We'll just call it DI. We're going to put it in slot 1. Now down here, this is a question some people have. So this is our electronic keying. That is you telling the software that this is the revision of firmware that's on the module. If you leave it a compatible module, the software will allow the actual physical module to work and with the software as long as it's compatible with the revision you put in here. If you change this to exact match, then the module out in the rack has to be an exact match to the revision you set here, or else you will get a fault on your processor. If you turn this off, which you should never do, except for in a lab environment where you can't hurt anything, then it completely ignore whatever revision you put in here, and it will just try to control the module the best it can. We usually leave this recommend exact match or compatible module. That way if somebody comes along, this module fails, and they just throw an old module in there with completely different firmware, you'll get an alarm on your processor telling you that it doesn't match what you put in here. So that's a kind of explanation of what that is. And then from here, there's not much to do as far as configuration on an AC digital input. So we'll just hit OK, and then it'll populate over here. Now let's go ahead and throw in an analog module. Call it AI. Same thing, keying's down here. We're going to leave it in slot 2. But then you can see over here we have to configure each channel. And this used to be something on the PLC5s and the older I/O that you had to change with dip switches, and you maybe had to do some scaling blocks in the program. Now you can just do all the configuration in the ControlLogix world right on the card. So we're going to leave it at current. We're going to say 0 to 20. And then over here, so 4 to 20 would be our 0 to 100% on that channel. We click OK, and it creates it over here for us. Now the other scenario would be you have I/O out on your Ethernet. So in that case, the L81 already has an embedded Ethernet port. If you didn't have an L81, if you were using an L7 controller, for example, you would have to come into the backplane and add your Ethernet module or your ControlNet module, whatever network you're using, and then click on the network. But since we already have an L81 with Ethernet, we're going to click on the Ethernet and add new module. The first thing you have to do is add a communication module. If you try to just go in and type in an IA16, you can see it doesn't show up because we can't just add a digital module out there on an Ethernet. So we have to first put an Ethernet adapter out there. And we have to give it an address. Click OK. And then from there we get this other chassis and backplane, and this is where, oh, you know what I forgot to do is in these adapters, in this module definition, you have to change the chassis size to tell it what's out there. How many modules are you going to add to this? Now it'll allow us to add a new module. There you go. That's how we add I/O. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do on this project, just to get us started, is how do we create a new routine? How do we put a ladder diagram in that we can go ahead and start programming with? So the first thing, it creates this main routine for you, and from here you can start programming. You can put in a jump to subroutine. We're going to go ahead and start a new routine, and we'll just call it routine. We'll leave it at ladder, and it's going to exist in our main program. So there's our routine. We can go ahead from here and start programming our I/O. And we'll call this a tag. So there, we now see how this is still red, and that's because this tag doesn't exist. So we right click on it, hit test and create. Now we have a valid rung. Now what won't happen, this will not execute until we call this program from our main program. So we're going to put something called a JSR in. Now when the main routine executes, it's going to call this routine, which is the routine we just collected, and it's going to come and execute this program. So that's the basics of just getting a 5000 program started, getting the firmware on your controller right, adding I/O, and creating a routine. If you need to know how to go online and download this to a program, to a processor, we did do a video on that. If you go and look at check out the other YouTube videos, we do have going online with a controller. And if you have any questions beyond that, contact your local automation specialist at your local Mosebach. It would be Dan Wagner at Altoona, Johnstown, Greensburg, Bill Smith, myself at Pittsburgh, and Paul Devers down in Fairmont. So thanks for listening. Once again, thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out future and current videos by subscribing to CED Mosebach Electric Supply on YouTube or visiting www.mosebach.com/media. Thanks again.